Hey, Pat, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to everybody, actually.
Well, we all appreciate that. Question for you about the kind of your evolution here this year. Do you feel like you've been able to go more into your, I guess, bag of tricks, or as you've gotten to know your team, because you keep talking about patience, that stuff that you maybe wanted to put in earlier, you had to wait and see till they learned, till there's enough building blocks to now be able to, use more things, dig deeper, and how much more of that do you think you can add here in the final 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think adding, subtracting, you're always trying to find the things. We all have a lot of plays, and we all have things that we like to do, but we like the plays that work, and typically it's the ones that your players can execute well. And so it's finding that happy balance between, okay, this is what our players can do. Here are the ways we want to try to get our receivers open, giving them opportunities, those types of things. And so, and it morphs as the season goes along. You get to some concepts that you're executing well. I heard somebody say one time that, if you develop some tendencies into working, it's because, you're executing it well, Now, then you're always doing things to change things up. So it's a fine line. I guess, we've talked about this in the past, some of the things that you want to try to do with the players in the offseason to kind of now not do them or do more of them early in the year. We didn't have that. We didn't have that luxury this year. So moving forward, I think there's, the mistakes we're making, I'll just take it all the way back to that. The mistakes we're making have taken points off the board. And, I think those are things that are huge, if you, as you go all the way back, and then it's the points, we probably had 25 points last week, but we had, the field goal and then a couple of, whatever's, but you have to score. And some of the turnovers, when you're in the field goal range and you turn the ball over and it gets returned back, that's a 10-point swing. We had one yesterday or last week, a fumble that was preventable. It was preventable, and they're always preventable, and they get 7 points out of it. So that those are the things those are mistakes that can't happen.
Jeff?
Hey, Pat, I'm curious, early, even last season, Drew often talked about sort of a pride he took in making plays off schedule or, rescuing a lost play sort of thing. And I'm curious about how you talk to him about finding the line of deciding what plays can really be saved and then when it's just time to bail.
Yeah, I think that comes into the natural decision-making of the quarterback. I think, you want to try to – you really always want to try to operate on schedule, and, go through your progressions and get the ball out on time, operate in the pocket. That's the little heroic part of being a quarterback. You think you can save everything. And so we talked to him about that, We talked to him about making good decisions throughout the down, especially late in the down. You don't want to put the ball in harm's way. And there are times when, and he's done a better job of this, a 4-yard scramble, although it doesn't look, it's not flashy, can be the right thing. There's times when you're on the sideline and, you're in a position where you might take a 2-yard sack where you throw the ball away. Those are the things that you see. There was, and I think he's learning, like late in the game, the 2-minute drives were really good last week. Forget the score, but we're really – and there's a couple times in the 2-minute drive where I called 4 verticals, and they all bailed out, and he quickly checked it down. There's some learning there, where in a former life, which would have been the first half of the season for him, he might have hung on that a little bit longer and then either made the throw to the back more heroic or so on and so forth. So those are the things that you see. And I think that's one maybe little example of, okay, there's nothing to be saved downfield. Check it out.
Excellent.
Yeah, Coach, starting with that Miami game, you did a lot of pulling and trapping or the counter stuff up front. And you've continued to do that to some degree. Is that kind of part of the identity of your running game now?
Yeah,
And
I think
yeah.
it always has been for me. You know, I've always been a one-back power type guy. You know, here we do it much more, and I think we do it better than places that I've been. You know, I think our guys have embraced it. We still run a considerable amount of zone plays. I think there's a place for all of it. You know, I think you got to be able to block the spots and run zone plays. But then I also think the block down pull schemes can create big plays because the ball, you know, is running around in the C gap and it may bounce to the edge, you know, where there's a lot of daylight. So there's a place for all of it. I think it's definitely a part of our identity. And that goes back to, you know, we do it over and over and over. And so I think what's happening now is our guys are getting lots of reps against a lot of looks so we can, you know, adjust the play and you know, keep it efficient. And then we've had some really explosive runs off it as well.
Next one, Nick.
Hey, Pat. Good morning. I talked to Vic and Drew, asked them both about this this week, but you guys in your last 7 trips into the red zone, going back to the Kansas City game, have scored touchdowns. And I'm curious, that success that you've had in that part of the field, what do you like most about what you guys are doing that's able to get in the end zone? And then secondly, what is there any part of that, the success you're having there, that's transferable to the rest of the field, or is it just two very kind of different things?
Not really. I mean, with regard to the red zone, I think we've gotten better on third downs. We've gotten better in the red zone. A lot of the critical things we've gotten better at. Although we've had a couple turnovers, we've had less turnovers, you know, and so it's more efficient because it always comes down to points. Yeah, and you know, we found a way to move the ball. You know, we moved the ball in the first drive last week, right? Took it down the field and then, you know, didn't get anything out of it. But, you know, I think with regard to the red zone, you know, there's throwing lanes get tighter, right? The field gets compressed. You know, a 3-yard run's a big deal. You know, we're out in the field. A 5 or a 6-yard run is what you're looking for. So as the field gets short, obviously, you know, you got to make good decisions. And then from a defensive standpoint, you're always attacking extremes. You know, they usually bring them all or drop them all, you know, and so there's the awareness there. And then the accuracy of the throws, all the things that go into it. And so as we get better at what we're doing, then you like to think it's going to show up there where it counts and you're scoring points. And I really don't care how we score. You know, some people lean toward throwing it in. Some people lean toward, you know, we can run it in, crawl it in, throw it in. I don't know, burrow under the ground in. I don't, however we get it in, I think is the key. And, you know, last week, right, yeah, we ran it in on 3rd and 6, you know, and I caught him playing pass and, you know, we called a run and we executed that. And it's the pull scheme that Mike was just talking about. And, you know, we executed it well and we got it in. And so, you know, that's really the gist of it. And, you know, you game plan the red zone like you do any other situation on the field. So try to determine what they're doing on what down and distance and then try to hit them with things that work, you know. And so how it correlates to the rest of the field, you like to be good everywhere, you know, but you certainly want to, when you look back on it, again, I'm probably talking too long here, but when you look back on it, you always look at the end of the day, the first thing people look at is, you know, your efficiency numbers, you know, your runs plus your pass completions. And then you look at how well you did on third downs, how many first downs you scored, and then, you know, your turnovers and then your efficiency in the red zone. You know, sometimes your third down numbers could be not great, but you've gotten a lot of first downs on second down. So you could have a lot of you can make a lot of first downs and not necessarily have great third down numbers sometimes. But, you know, those are all things that speak to how well you played.
That's time for a few more. Next.
Hey, Pat, earlier you alluded to the play with 4 verticals when Drew checked down and said that he wouldn't have made that type of play maybe earlier in the season, but he can now. So in what areas do you want to see Drew grow next to kind of keep taking those steps that you want him to take?
Well, in every area, I think, you know, he's displayed the ability to do a lot of really good things. And, you know, as you develop as a quarterback, you know, we start talking about consistency, doing it over and over and over again, and having full understanding of the situation and where the ball's supposed to go, and making sure we're in the right run, making sure we manage the line of scrimmage well. You know, I think he's done a good job with some of that. You know, we really haven't been fighting the clock all that much. You know, we haven't had a lot of pre-snap penalties. You know, we're calling plays that I recognize. You know, sometimes the quarterback will call a play and we'll come out of the huddle and I'm like, holy smokes, what is that? You know, I mean, so, you know, he's doing that stuff better. You know, and that's the efficiency piece that maybe a lot of people don't see. You know, so as the season's gone along, I'll be like, you know, there's less and less of, hey, what the heck was that? You know, from my standpoint, right? And from our standpoint, watching it, which is good. And so you know, and everything with regard to improvement is just consistency, doing it over and over and over. And that's where it's very important. But you got to do it over and over and over. You got to be consistent. And you got to play winning football. It all goes hand in hand.
Jeff, I know you had a follow-up before we'll end here. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Pat, just taking the Saints game out of the mix, how is Melvin Gordon, you know, so he's on a pretty good run here. How has that happened? And, you know, is it just him getting comfortable, or have you done tweak something along the way there?
No, I think, again, it's just becoming more and more comfortable with what we're doing. Hearing the play, knowing it, being able to visualize it. You know, I think he can be a very dynamic runner. You know, he can get through there when it's not always clean, but he does a good job of making long runs when it is clean. And, you know, I think he's finished pretty well into the end zone. Caught the ball well the other night. I thought he had a really good game the other night, you know, in a lot of areas. You know, and that's probably a better question for him, you know, but I think, you know, we've seen throughout the year the kind of things he can do as a runner, and all the things behind the scenes, the blocking, running the proper routes and all those types of things. You know, I think everybody, and he's included, they're all improving, you know, and that's a good thing.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Hey, Ed. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you. As you went back and looked at the Buffalo game, what were some of the, you know, just the biggest things that stuck out in terms of your defensive effort that day?
There was a lot of things, you know, that went on in that game, but we just break it down to individual things. You know, how were people attacking us, you know, schematically, and then what was our execution and how can we improve that? And then we always, you know, grade our guys' effort, you know, and finish. And, you know, tackling is something we want to do better than we did in that game.
Next one, Brandon.
Ed, last week you said you relish in the challenge being undermanned there in the secondary, but I think at some point it may be a little too much to overcome. This week you have a similar challenge, especially if Keenan Allen is, in fact, on the field. We know he's obviously dealing with a hamstring. So how can you have these guys build on what they did last week, knowing got Pro Bowlers on the other side and first-round picks and everything?
Yes, there's similar challenges. You know, we got a big, strong-arm quarterback, and he's got a lot of weapons. But, you know, anytime you do something and you don't reach the success level you want to win the game or be effective, you know, you go back and take a hard look at yourself. And this is another opportunity to rectify that. So, you know, that's where all our energy is. And, you know, what can we learn from last week to move forward?
Next one, Mike.
Yeah, Coach, last year, Brandon Staley, I think, was a surprise hire as a defensive coordinator because he had limited NFL experience, and now he's in the conversation for head coach. Is this one of those rare guys, you know, that's ready with limited experience to be a head coach?
Yes, it is, you know, and I've been around, you know, 3 decades now in coaching, and every once in a while a young, bright guy that sees the game globally comes around. This guy sees offense, defense, special teams, kind of knows how they work, mature beyond his years. And we have early evidence. You know, I used to have countless discussions with this guy. We spent 3 straight years together, but, you know, we just spent a lot of time. And he was always about philosophy and how he's going to put it together and so forth. But there's a lot of evidence that a guy could take over a defense with no OTAs, shortened training camp, and have them at the top of the NFL right now. And they've played some good teams. You know, he's a great communicator and a great teacher. There's no question about that. And he you know, I know he has Aaron Donald and Ramsey. They're premium players in this league, but he has all the other guys playing well. And he can get all the players to play well. They're playing in harmony. It's an extraordinary job of teaching to get that done in 1 year and contribute that to their team. You know, I view this guy as this is the Sean of McVay of defense. This is that young, bright mind that sees it all, that can communicate with people. He's just outstanding with his relationships in the building and how he relates to people. But you know, Vic will say, you know, he contributed great to us. We couldn't be happier to see him out on his own, you know, and blooming like this and this coming out. But he's really taken advantage of the opportunity.
Next one, Andrew.
Hey, Ed, Kareem Jackson, he mentioned yesterday that sometimes he and Justin, they were getting caught up in trying to overcompensate to help out the young cornerbacks playing out there on Saturday. So as coaches, how do you try to help these corners out, and how do you get everyone else to kind of focus on their job and not kind of, like Kareem said, get caught in overcompensating?
Yeah. Well, we like to think we're pretty good, and Vic is an expert at moving the hard down around in the National Football League. You know, so we do that. It is common. This isn't the first time you have, you know, we're very, very young outside, very experienced inside, and they do want to help, you know, and they can, you know, I don't know what the term is, but just take a little time to help and make sure you guys are covered down. That's normal. It's our job as coaches to keep everything, you know, by the rule as much as we can and help and understand what's going on with all of them. And it's very rare. And Justin and Kareem are, you know, they've just been a big part in this. You guys may not see the results you want, but when they do come, they will be, you know, the reason for us holding this together.
Next one.
Yeah, Coach, what was your reaction to seeing Bradley and Justin make the Pro Bowl, and particularly for you, just as well as, you know, Bradley, seeing the emotional response he had to making it? What was that like?
Yeah, you know, two different things. Everybody's really happy for Bradley's, you know, comeback. You know, to come back from the injury and have such a strong year, and that's neat. He's such a good guy for our team, and his teammates love him. You know, for Justin, you know, you just look back over those 3 decades, and I've been fortunate to work with a lot of good players, and he's another one, and he brings stuff that I've never had before, of just the way, you know, he just connects people. And there's so many little things that go on a daily basis that nobody sees, that I feel and help us as a coaching staff, that I see from him. And, you know, that, you know, how complete can you be? He's complete with his teammates, his coaches, off the field, great husband, father. You know, this guy's complete, and he's a very giving person to other people. So I love seeing that. You know, a true safety, in my mind, a very valuable element is a guy that can play center field and a guy that can process and get the ball in the deep part of the field. I think he's going to keep getting it more. But he does do that. This is one of the top center fielders. The voters, they got this one right. They got this one right. This guy deserves it.
Time for a few more. Next one, Jeff.
Ed, from a teaching perspective, I'm curious how you approached Singletary's late touchdown from Saturday's game. Was that a technique issue, an effort issue, all of the above?
Yeah.
And did it make you mad that it came in the last?
You know, we're coaches, and deep in our heart is the run game, you know, and we don't like seeing that. We don't like seeing it at the end. There's no question about that. So it does hurt. But, you know, I just got to make sure everybody's reminded and focused. And, you know, we were in a defense where we're trying to make something happen. So there is risk reward in it. Still, we have to make the plays as players and coach it better. So, no, you know, no, I don't like that. Nobody that's a good coach likes that at all.
Last one we got is
Hey, Coach, thanks for talking with us today. How impactful has Shelby Harris been since he's come back from having COVID?
He's a big part of what we do. There's no question. He's experience. He's rush. He's a connector in there. This guy's got a rare sense of batting balls down, and he's done it at very, very key times in our season and teaching the other guys how to do it. But, he's having a heck of a year. He came back in great shape. This was a little bit of a temporary setback for him, the COVID thing, but he's back working and doing really well.
Hey, Coach, thanks for talking with us today. Where have you been most impressed with your unit progressing from week one up until now?
Punt. No question. You get a punt blocked against Tampa and you're 37-yard net, and now we're 42, giving up 7 per return, so we're getting much better there. Field goal, Brandon's had a good year. It takes everybody. Field goal block, we've got 2. But that would be the biggest rise is the punt team's getting better.
Next one, Brandon.
Coach, how nice is it to have Brandon back? And it was obviously a bit of a tough spot for Taylor. How'd you think he did when you went back and looked at it?
Taylor was terrible. He had a bad day. It got a little big for him. The wind didn't handle it right. So it's one of those where I think it shows, to answer your first question, it shows how happy you are to get Brandon back. This is a tough league. It took Brandon McMahon 2 years to kick a field goal in this league. With failures, this, that, the other. So you can see how valuable those players are, and it showed up in that game, not just on field goal, but on kickoffs. But got big for him. The wind, he didn't handle it right. He'll get better.
Next one, Andrew.
Hey, Tom, Jacob Bobenmoyer, of course, had the recovery of the muffed punt. How has he come along over the course of the year, and what's the long-term outlook for him as a long snapper in this league?
I think he's come along really well, Mace. The first 4 games were, he didn't get a preseason, so it was hard for Sam, trying to get used to a new snapper. And the other thing is, I think most of you guys know, but he's a lefty. So the ball comes off different, and most punters don't see lefty snappers very often. And his accuracy wasn't great. It was kind of like the first 4 games getting through like I was saying, like a preseason. But I'll tell you what, he's been doing a great job. His snaps are very accurate. He's a factor in coverage. He's very physical. You get these linebackers and defensive linemen. It's kind of where this league's going with snappers right now because they're protected. You want these guys in coverage. He not only had a fumble recovery, but he's had a tackle in the last 3 games. So it's getting better and better. I think the sky's the limit for him, and I love his preparation. He's out there 25 minutes for everybody else in his own world. We all got to give ourselves, time each day just to be our time, and he's really taking advantage of it. He's turned into a good pro. And Brandon and Sam have done a lot for him. They're hard on him, which is good. You don't baby those guys. This is pro football. You got to go out and perform. It's a production business, and Bob has taken that role on.
Final one.
Hey, Tom, how do you compartmentalize a game like that for Taylor versus what you've seen in practice, the traits that you like about him that kind of show you he's worth continuing to develop? And then I guess how do you get somebody ready for that moment? You said it was too big for him. How do you get somebody ready for that?
The hard part, your last question, to get a guy ready for those wins, the only way you can do it is you got to have that in practice, and you only get 2 practices with him. So you have to have him in the preseason. You have to have him in the off season. You got to put him in those situations where you get weather for, 2 months to work with. But you just keep developing, and we're in a situation right now with COVID, and I think that you guys all realize this, that you can't go replace a guy if they have a bad game, really, because the next COVID kicker you bring in, you won't work with them till Saturday, So it's one of those where you keep working with him, and if something comes up, I think he'll, he's learned from it. Focused more on the task than the situation. And this week, naturally he and I go out and practice, and he looks like the guy that he looked like last week, during practice. But just keep developing him. And I'll be lying to you if I don't say, I want to see Brandon the next 2 weeks, and I want to see Brandon for the next 4 years, every single week, every single minute of the day, every hour of the day. Want to see Brandon because, he's established himself. He's earned that right. That's a compliment.